Today, we got confirmation that the Supreme Court is fully in the pocket of the far right. In fact, they're even further to the right than former President Donald Trump. In 2017, a gunman opened fire on a crowd of people at a music festival in Las Vegas. More than 850 people were injured and 60 died. The shooter managed to fire 1,000 rounds in about 11 minutes because 12 of his rifles were outfitted with bump stocks, devices that allow semi-automatic weapons to fire bullets faster. In the aftermath and under pressure, the Trump administration enacted a ban on bump stocks. But today, the Supreme Court ruled that one small protection against gun violence was too much, striking down the ban. Senator Chris Murphy is a Democrat from Connecticut. He is one of the leading voices in the fight against gun violence, and he joins me now. Senator, I want to thank you. As someone who has been frighteningly close to multiple mass shootings at multiple universities that I have attended and worked at, I want to personally thank you for the work that you have done about this epidemic and this crisis in this country. I'll start with this. What is your reaction to the Supreme Court's just naked dismissal of the gun crisis that our country is in right now?
Well, thanks for having me. I'm sorry for your experience. Unfortunately, it is not the exception these days. It is the norm. Listen, the Supreme Court got it wrong. I mean, plain and simple. And it's yet another decision from this Supreme Court that makes it clear that they are on their way to a radical rewriting of the ability for Congress and the ability of the executive branch to keep our communities safe. Listen, everybody who knows anything about a bump stock knows that it effectively turns a semi-automatic weapon into an automatic weapon. Through a single pull of the trigger, you can fire multiple rounds. That is the definition in law of a machine gun, and the Supreme Court should have allowed for this regulation put in place by the Trump administration to stay as law. And now with this ruling, once again, you are going to be able to have very deranged individuals like the Las Vegas shooter once again be able to easily modify a semi-automatic weapon in which you can, get off 60 rounds per minute and modify it into an automatic weapon in which you are firing off multiple hundreds of rounds a minute. And that means in these mass shootings, more and more people will die. Lives are going to be cost by the decision of the Supreme Court today.
Senator, I feel like we've been saying this a lot over the last 5 or 6 years, and unfortunately maybe saying it for another 30 or 40. How do we work around the Supreme Court? Because it seems like every time Congress or elected officials make some effort, they cut it off at the knees. What can other branches do in order to sort of provide some gun safety for Americans if the court is consistently opposed?
So it is important to note that this decision on bump stocks is actually not a decision on the scope of the Second Amendment. The Bruen decision, which is a decision from a prior conservative court, did reinterpret the Second Amendment and creates a really confusing new test for district courts in which they have to look at the historical precedent of regulating firearms in this country, which, of course, is very difficult when you have technologies changing very fast. But as it stands today, the Supreme Court has not fundamentally overruled the Heller decision. And the Heller decision says that things like universal background checks and restrictions on weapons like assault weapons are still legal. Now, the Supreme Court may eventually overrule Heller, but for the time being, when states pass assault weapons bans, they are largely upheld by the courts. And unquestionably, when states or the federal government expands background check requirements, which is the intervention that saves the most lives in this country, those are upheld by the courts as well. So we have to be worried about the Supreme Court, but we can pass new laws today and they will pass constitutional muster. So there's no reason for us to wait to pass an assault weapons ban or universal background checks. Let's worry about the court down the line. Let's just choose to save lives right now.
Speaking of the court, one of the most consistent stories we've seen pretty much since last summer is that we have one particular member of the court, many of whom are compromised, but one particular member of the court, Clarence Thomas, has consistently been shown to be basically in the pocket of a Bond villain, Harlan Crow. I mean, he is the puppeteer for everything Clarence Thomas seems to do. He is the Jim Henson to his Kermit. And that is affecting our ability to not just pass legislation, but have that legislation respected. What kinds of reforms do you think the president and Democrats and Republicans who care about democracy should be trying to initiate now to rein this court in and weed out this kind of compromise and corrupt justices?
Yeah, I mean, this is a straight up grift, right? There's no question what is happening here. Harlan Crow, who is one of the most politically involved multimillionaires or billionaires in the country, who has got a clear political agenda, who has multiple interests before the court, is paying off Clarence Thomas in a multitude of different ways, giving him lavish trips, paying the rent of his mother. We probably have only uncovered the tip of the amount of money that Harlan Crow is directing to Clarence Thomas. And he is not doing that because they are best buddies. This is not a legacy relationship that goes back to their childhood days. He only started giving Clarence Thomas money once Clarence Thomas got in a position to rule on Harlan Crow's interests. What can we do? Well, we can take a look at Supreme Court reform. There are really interesting proposals that would limit the terms of Supreme Court justices. We can impose a statutory code of conduct that would require these justices to report these interactions, that would ban these kind of gifts and would have consequences if they violate the law. So we are not powerless to try to do something about this just extraordinary corruption that specifically Justice Thomas is involved in, and we should get moving on it. And listen, I don't know why this has become a partisan issue. Why do Democrats only care about the corporate corruption of the court? Republicans should care about this too.
Exactly. Senator Chris Murphy, thank you so much for your time and coming on tonight on All In.